to the Decentralized Asset Management Fireside Chat. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about DeFi and DAOs and how they're utilized in decentralized asset management. Today, I have the co-founder of Pollen DAO, Roman, up here on the stage, and I'd love to welcome you to DeFi Summit.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me.
So let's kind of like zoom out before we dive into this a little bit more. Like what, we see with DeFi, with the primitives coming online, lending, where do you think we are in DeFi right now? And, what is your outlook in terms of the outlook for DAOs and DeFi in the next phase right now after like DeFi summer and all the yield farming and lending and everything?
Sure, yeah. So if you look at kind of where we are in DeFi now, if you take a step back, we've essentially built out, or the ecosystem, now has effectively two main pillars, if you will, built out that have been ported over from the traditional, financial service world. So that's services centered around lending and liquidity. We started with lending, right? If you go back a few years ago to some of the more centralized players with Celsius, Nexo, BlockFi, etc., before kind of moving over to decentralized players, Aave, Compound, and then kind of the breakthrough last summer, of course, was automated market maker that reimagined the approach to liquidity and has allowed for this explosion in TVL that we've now seen over this last year and a half plus, from effectively just a couple $100 million in total value locked in DeFi protocols to now latest I checked was about $60 billion off of a recent high of 100 billion. But we still have a long way to go. We're just getting started. There's only maybe about 1 million total users in DeFi, and so there's definitely a lot of room to grow. And new tools and ways of doing things, and kind of carving out new areas of financial services that are kind of untapped and haven't been reimagined in a decentralized manner is definitely the next kind of way forward. And I think how we bring in more users and make it more accessible and more valuable to people to use decentralized applications.
So I guess with the decentralized asset management, I guess, is that what Pollen DAO? Can you give us a little quick intro about what Pollen DAO is before we kind of dive a little bit more into the topic?
Yeah, definitely. So Pollen DAO at a high level is a decentralized asset management platform. Effectively, we allow people to create tokenized indices and also essentially participate in the investment decision-making process and the reward structure around that investment, those investment decisions. So if you think about the traditional asset management realm, you have a portfolio manager and an investor relationship where you have a portfolio manager who calls all the shots and earns all the fees. And then the investor essentially plays a more passive role, at least in that actively managed space, where they can choose what managers to go with and they can choose who to invest with, but they have no real say in the decisions that happen in those portfolios, and certainly they don't share in the reward structure. So what Pollen has enabled is it's essentially a DAO platform, and we have a governance structure in place that allows people, to the best of their abilities, participate in voting on investment decisions on behalf of a shared portfolio that is comprised of a number of other tokens. So you can think of it as like an ETF of tokens, right? We call it PI, Pollen Asset Index, and they make decisions with their Pollen tokens for what happens in the PI portfolio. And critically, then, if they make good decisions, they stand to earn Pollen token for their actions in helping to manage the portfolio. So instead of like on yield farming, or where you're providing liquidity for liquidity's sake, here you earn rewards for your more productive work, if you will, helping to manage a shared portfolio. Justin, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. How does that differ from, I guess, like the existing options right now, from like centralized options or even like other DAOs currently? I think we're kind of like seeing this movement with the crowd, with like, obviously with like Wall Street Bets kind of being a unofficial DAO in its own way, a social DAO, where people are collectively buying and doing it themselves as well too. So it's not like a full collective in a way. It's just like a whole herd of everybody moving one direction. But
Mm-hmm.
it is showing, isn't it, I guess isn't it showing kind of like the power though of like collective investing or collective power to the people, I guess, right? Like
Yeah,
GameStop.
exactly. I mean, it highlights the essentially the power of communities. Previously, retail investors have always been traditionally written off as either unsophisticated, stupid, or just generally don't have enough sway to impact the market meaningfully. But with the whole GameStop saga and Wall Street bets, we've now seen that if enough of them come together, they can actually be the market and move the markets. But right now, it's all done very kind of ad hoc and just kind of in a de facto basis where people do rally around groups such as Wall Street Bets or any other, investment group chat. But all people can do in these chats is essentially talk in them, talk about strategies, what they're doing, what they're not doing. But you don't necessarily know what people are actually doing, and who's just there to stir things up or just to peek in and
Pump, yeah, or hype things
exactly
out,
right.
right?
So there's no real accountability structure, number one. And number two, there's no way that they can actually logistically trade and invest together. So everybody just goes and reads or chats, whatever, and then they go back to their personal portfolios and make decisions based on their incomplete and imperfect information that they had access to, that they read, right? But what if Wall Street Bets or any other community for that matter could actually come together and really logistically invest together in a shared portfolio where there's a governance structure in place so that they don't necessarily have to know and trust all the other parties in the group and still be able to transact together. So that's really what we're focusing on. Like um, if you think about existing DAOs right now, they're more just like they call themselves DAOs, but it's really just a group of like maybe 50 people that all know each other and have a reasonable degree of trust together.
Mm.
There's no platform, there's no kind of broader like platform that allows for uh, larger groups of people to come together and trade collectively, if you will.
So with like the current state of DAOs, I guess, with which what you just kind of like alluded, I guess we're still, would you say like in like the phase one of DAOs right now, like still in early iterations of it? Because like we see with DAOs, like they're either going to be like the collective DAO incubators, so
Mm-hmm.
accelerators, so they're just kind of like a syndicate almost. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
There's others that are just like on-chain decision making, depending on like a charity or just taking proposals, but we saw kind of like that kind of get mixed up. I guess when it comes to going, governance as well too. I guess how you guys are seeing that playing part in terms of decision making, in terms of like what projects or tokens the Pollen DAO or the collective decentralized asset management pool invests in as well.
Yeah, definitely. So if you look at most, again, if you look at most quote unquote existing DAOs right now, um, they generally tend to be focused on venture type investments, right? They're looking at new token deals and investing in new opportunities. But what about, just liquid market? There's, most investors, your average, let's call them investors that want to get access to crypto are not going to be going for like the most fringe, latest new, private token sale. Um, Not to mention they wouldn't necessarily even have access in the first place. If but if you have a token, in our case pi, pollen asset index, that tracks a broader portfolio, then you can have a much more holistic exposure to crypto as a broad asset class, as opposed to just having to pick and choose all the winners yourself. So instead of buying just Bitcoin and ETH, and then everything else is this mystery, or you need to spend like all your time going through and figuring out exactly what you want to buy, you can just go and buy Pi, right? Or any of our other, kind of manage portfolios. And the question is, well, who's managing them? Well, there's an incentive structure that anyone can come in and manage them in a responsible manner. And so as long as you trust that that incentive structure is there, then that's kind of, how it works. At the end of the day, if you think about it, all crypto, all blockchains work because of aligned incentive structures, right? Bitcoin works because miners have an incentive to mine. They earn some block rewards, and yeah, so no one person has to like actively, control it. It's just anyone can do it. So we're trying to take an approach like that, if you will, to portfolio management, to asset management.
With Pollen DAO, I guess, is it just one single collective index, or are you guys building like little subsets and sub buckets that people can contribute and be part of as well? I mean, this is still. I mean, we saw some indexes come out with like, for example, the DeFi Pulse Index, the DPI. I wouldn't say that that's actually like decentralized or a DAO at all, really. I mean, it's like they choose kind of like what that bucket looks like, really.
Yeah.
And it's a plug and play. I guess you easily can buy it and that's it, set and forget. But you really don't get to choose what's in that bag, right? Does Pollen, is it just one single collective index, or is it like a divided? I guess, what does that look like for the people who are participating in the decentralized index?
Yeah, so we're planning on launching towards the end of the summer. At launch, we'll have one core portfolio, one main index token, that's Pi. In the future, though, we definitely we will allow, rather I should say, people to create their own custom indices, their own custom portfolios, so that people can have community-centric ones, right? Say a Wall Street Bets focused one, or maybe a DeFi Summit one, right? So that you can have a kind of different flavors and also different risk appetites and profiles. But what we've seen with, say, the DeFi Pulse Index and token sets, right? While they've allowed people to create their own ones, getting one right first, in our mind, is the way to go, especially since we are introducing this decentralized governance approach to it. Like, if you look at DeFi Pulse Index, it's essentially three guys in Brooklyn who make the decisions around the allocations and the rebalancing of that portfolio. And for those who aren't familiar with it, I mean, it's an interesting product. Recommend checking it out. But just know that you're trusting, a small handful of individuals to manage and rebalance the composition, and the weighting of that portfolio. So what we're trying to do is essentially take DPI and imagine, what if we empowered the community of traders, investors, DeFi degens, right? Everyone to come on and have a say in what assets comprise effectively, our equivalent of DPI, in our case Pi, and in the future, other portfolios. So that's kind of where we're coming at it from. And so we spend a lot of time on development to get that right, to get that DAO architecture in place. And very happy to say we'll hopefully be the first to market with that. This is still a very new thing, but 2 years from now, I believe, in the same way that lending and liquidity products and DeFi are now established, understood, just standard things that people interact with. Similarly, token indices, tokens that track baskets of other tokens, and decentralized asset management platforms such as Pollen will become just as ubiquitous and utilized as the lending, as our lending and liquidity counter, equivalents, namely Aave and Uniswap. So we're really trying to be essentially the Uniswap of asset management, and drive DeFi in that direction.
Yeah, I think that we're still really early in phase one of DAOs, but I do believe that if you look at like the phases of what's happening in crypto and blockchain and overall, like I see that, you know, obviously we had DeFi summer, then we had this like NFT like craze as well as phase one phase one that happened with NFTs with the NBA Top Shots and whatnot. I think that, yeah, we still haven't seen like the full inflection point yet for DAOs, but I do believe it will be coming and it will be another big wave in its own self. Because I still think it's super early on. And I think that it has a ton of power to impact different markets. In this case, this one could be like markets and investing, and giving, you know, access to decentralized options to the masses and crowd too. Seeing that, you know, good.
Oh yeah, so I was just gonna add that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's still super early on all fronts. Again, like I mentioned, there's only approximately maybe 1 million DeFi users total right now. And yeah, again, on the DAO side, they're either these loose structures of, you know, friends effectively that invest together, or people who are working on more, you know, kind of sophisticated DAOs. They tend to be very esoteric applications, right? It's still out there. It's maybe like too early for that kind of stuff. You know, a great example of that, I mean, great platform is something like Aragon, right? But it's just so like far removed from, I think, what most people would be using on any sort of a regular frequency. So asset management, you know, portfolio management, and you know, shared investing, I think is a logical, you know, path for DAO to take. And so naturally we've already seen some go down that road, but not, you know, but so far it's been more kind of casual approach versus a, you know, let's build a platform and let people build their own DAOs effectively out on this.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to look out when we can build the DeFi Summit DAO or an index with Pollen. Getting into kind of like the little more weeds now of like the platform itself. You guys built it from the ground up, or I guess is it like it seems like you guys have to build a lot of different customizations, and I'm assuming then like if anybody can build proposals, but you guys are having some sort of, you know, I'd imagine if people are like making really bad calls and stuff, they're going to be penalized. Do you guys have like a reputation system, or like how does that work? Like, can anybody propose assets and ideas to the DAO itself, and how do you guys filter out spam, filter out bad decisions, or second part question I'll dive a little later is like, how do you guys filter out like whale domination? Especially we've seen that in DAOs too, right? Like people taking over DAOs just because they own a ton of the tokens as well. So we can answer the first part of the question too, is just like how are you guys handling the decision making?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
There is a reputation system in place. Yes. There will be a reputation system. We have a team currently working on that, a couple of PhDs, looking at different, essentially, you know, portfolio theory and modeling, you know, models around that, looking at essentially like a P naught versus PFT, PFT plus one, and then looking at Sharpe ratio, et cetera. So you can essentially track the impact that someone's decision has had on the broader portfolio. And then we weigh that decision we'll weigh that decision into kind of awarding, you know, someone's reputation points, which then in turn translates
score.
To
yeah,
exactly. So you can't cheat your reputation score, and you know, through your reputation score is kind of how you earn rewards. Similarly, you know, we'll have then a delegation model in place where people will be able to essentially like stake or delegate their voting power onto you. So if you've built up an impressive track record, then instead of having to vote on stuff yourself, let's just say you have some pollen tokens, and or let's say I just have, you know, a few pollen tokens, but maybe you are super involved and active on the platform, then and you've made a lot of good decisions, and you know, you've built up your reputation. I can just delegate my vote power to you and effectively split our rewards. So you would stand to earn extra rewards, and I would still earn kind of more passively then. So I've effectively now entered into what mimics like a yield-bearing instrument, right? Sort of akin to yield farming, where it's more passive. You just stake onto another user, and then you are incentivized to share your alpha, right, with the portfolio, because now you can earn not just on behalf of your own decisions, but through a multiplier effect of people staking onto you, right? So that's kind of how we're looking at incentivizing good decision making, if you will. And then as far as who can submit proposals for what to add or remove to the DAO, to the portfolio, yeah, I mean, you'll have to own some pollen and pie, right? You need to have some skin in the game in order to do that. And yeah, as far so that's kind of the whole first part of the question. The second part of the question, whale domination.
Yeah, well, I guess it's just like thinking about like when it comes to like decision making in DAOs too. I've seen it where you'd cast a vote, one token, potentially one vote, but what happens is like the whales still decide, like overnight you just see it tip the other way, like in terms of proposals. I guess it's still like an ongoing thing that DAOs haven't fully, like a lot of DAOs haven't figured it out. I mean, I'd love to just like hear some thoughts about that in terms of because it's been like a recurring thing that I've seen in some DAOs as well too.
It's a valid point. Again, through our reputation model and delegation model, we hope to kind of mitigate some of that, so that way it's not necessarily just the people with the most money, but the people with the best decisions that will dictate stuff. And then there's an incentive for people with more pollen to actually just delegate to better decision makers. So then, again, as I mentioned earlier, crypto is all about getting incentive structures right, aligning incentives, and if you can build a platform where you have incentives aligned, where people don't have to know or trust each other explicitly, but can still transact safely together in on a shared network and a shared environment, then that's kind of when you've built something, pretty special. I feel, right? I mean, I'm not saying that we've done that yet. I hope we will get to that point, but that's certainly what we're striving, towards.
Great. Yeah, I guess we're hitting the tail end here of today's fireside chat. I guess, yeah, do you have any closing thoughts in terms of like the future of like decentralized asset management and DAOs in general?
Yeah, so I guess, hopefully, if we're successful in this, a couple of years from now, we'll look back and this will seem like common knowledge. By the time we get there, the same thing, like, if we were to have a conversation around how does a crypto-backed loan work at this point, right? It kind of reminds me. So my background, just really quickly, spent a couple of years in traditional finance, then moved over to crypto. Was one of the original team members at Celsius, before then consulting, other crypto startups, before then finally going out on my own and starting Pollen DAO. Because I really believe that this is the next wave, this is the next direction for DeFi to go in. But it just reminds me of like how, 3-4 years ago, I was talking about, how crypto-backed loan would work. DeFi as a term didn't even exist yet. And people were like, I don't know, it seems a little risky, it's sketchy, it's out there, is it a scam? How do you trust the other people? And that's kind of how I feel right now, talking about now tokenized indices and portfolio management DAOs. So I think that just give it enough time, and we'll be kind of in a similar place, a couple of years time from now.
Awesome. Well, we'll look forward to getting updates as you guys progress, and we'll probably do another little follow-up at another time, perhaps at the next DeFi Summit. So thanks, Roman. Thanks for coming on, and we'll continue on with today's programming.
Definitely, yeah. Keep me posted. Love to join again and share an update with you guys and DeFi Summit community.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Justin.